I had always been drawn to the eerie and unexplained, which is why I jumped at the chance to explore the abandoned town of Stillwater, Oklahoma. Rumor had it that the entire town was haunted, and as an amateur paranormal investigator, I couldn't resist. I arrived on a rainy evening, the sky a swirling mass of dark clouds. The downpour created a melancholic symphony on the roof of my car as I pulled up to the house that was said to be the epicenter of the town's ghostly activity. The house loomed before me, a decaying Victorian mansion with broken windows and a sagging roof. Ivy crawled up the walls like the skeletal fingers of long-dead inhabitants. I parked my car and grabbed my flashlight, the beam cutting through the thick curtain of rain as I made my way to the front door. The door creaked open with an eerie groan, revealing a dimly lit hallway shrouded in shadows. The air inside was musty and thick with the scent of rotten decay, a cloying miasma that clung to my skin and clothes. Water dripped from the ceiling in a slow, relentless cadence, forming small, stagnant puddles on the cracked wooden floor. Each drop echoed like the ticking of a deathwatch beetle, amplifying the oppressive silence. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me with a resounding bang, causing me to jump. The sound reverberated through the hallway, mingling with the distant roll of thunder outside, as if the house itself was sealing me in its grasp. The hallway was lined with old portraits, their once vibrant colors now faded and ghostly. The eyes in the paintings seemed to follow me as I moved, their gaze cold and accusing. The faces were stern, their expressions frozen in time, each one a silent witness to the house's dark history. I shivered, feeling an unsettling chill creep up my spine, as if unseen hands were brushing against my skin. Cobwebs hung in thick, dusty curtains from the ceiling corners, swaying gently in the draft that whispered through the cracks in the walls. The wallpaper, once elegant, was now peeling and discolored, curling at the edges like old, withered leaves. Every step I took seemed to echo in the emptiness, the sound absorbed by the oppressive darkness that enveloped me. I had read about this house, about the family that disappeared mysteriously in the early 1900s, leaving everything behind as if they had vanished into thin air. Their fates were never discovered, and the house had stood abandoned ever since, a decaying monument to their memory. The knowledge of their disappearance weighed heavily on me as I ventured further, each step feeling like a journey into the past, into the heart of the house's enduring sorrow and mystery. I wandered into the living room, where a grand, dust-covered piano stood against the wall, its once lustrous wood now dull and lifeless. The keys, yellowed with age, seemed to whisper of forgotten melodies. The furniture, shrouded in white sheets, gave the room a ghostly, spectral appearance, as if it were waiting for the return of its long-lost occupants. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in brief, eerie bursts of bluish-white light. Each flash cast elongated shadows that danced on the walls, transforming ordinary objects into monstrous silhouettes. The flickering light revealed glimpses of the ornate but decaying plasterwork on the ceiling, now cracked and crumbling with neglect. I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving out of the corner of my eye, a dark, fleeting shape that seemed to dart across the room. I turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing there. Only the silence, thick and oppressive, filled the space around me, pressing in like a suffocating shroud. A sense of dread settled over me as I moved deeper into the room, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. The fireplace was cold and empty, its once welcoming hearth now a gaping maw of darkness. Above it hung a large mirror, its surface tarnished and cracked, the glass distorted and foggy. As I stared into the mirror, trying to discern my own reflection in its murky depths, I saw movement behind me, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker. I spun around, my pulse quickening, but the room was empty, save for the ancient furniture and the weighty silence that seemed to swallow all sound. The mirror's reflection had shown nothing more than shadows and phantoms, but the sense of being watched remained, a constant gnawing presence at the edge of my awareness. Determined to uncover the secrets of the house, I found the door to the basement. It was old and splintered, barely hanging on its rusted hinges. The wood was warped and discolored, bearing the scars of time and neglect. I pushed it open, the hinges protesting with a shrill, metallic screech that echoed through the desolate hallways. The smell of damp earth and mold assaulted my senses, a pungent reminder of the house's long abandonment. The staircase leading down was steep and narrow, descending into an abyss of darkness. Each step creaked ominously under my weight, the sound reverberating through the confined space. The walls were lined with cobwebs, thick and dusty, trembling as I brushed past them. The air grew colder with each step, a biting chill that seeped into my bones. At the bottom, I shone my flashlight around the basement. The beam cut through the dense gloom, revealing a cluttered, chaotic space. Old furniture, covered in grime and rot, stood haphazardly alongside broken crates and rusted tools. It was as if the remnants of a long-forgotten life had been carelessly tossed aside, left to decay in the suffocating darkness. The walls were damp, streaked with moss and mildew, and the floor was uneven, patches of cold, hard earth visible through the cracked concrete. Shadows danced in the corners, their shapes shifting and melding with each flicker of my flashlight. I felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that I was not alone in this subterranean tomb. I heard a faint whispering, unintelligible and distant, growing louder with each passing second. The sound was disconcerting, like a chorus of disembodied voices murmuring secrets from beyond the grave. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I felt a cold breath on my ear, a chilling caress that sent shivers down my spine. I spun around, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but there was nothing there, only the shadows, mocking me with their silent, ever-shifting presence. The whispering continued, a spectral symphony that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the basement. I felt the weight of the house's dark history pressing down on me, its secrets clawing their way to the surface, demanding to be uncovered. My flashlight's beam landed on a large wooden chest in the corner of the basement. It was an imposing relic, its once polished surface now dulled by a thick layer of dust and tangled cobwebs. The chest seemed out of place among the other debris, an ominous presence that exuded an air of forgotten importance. The iron fittings were rusted, and the lock, though broken, still bore the marks of desperate attempts to keep its contents hidden. I approached it cautiously, my heart racing. Each step felt heavier than the last, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me like a physical weight. As I reached the chest, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lid. The whispering, which had been a constant backdrop to my exploration, suddenly ceased, plunging the basement into an eerie, unnatural silence. The air felt charged, as if the house itself was holding its breath. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. It opened with a groan, releasing a cloud of dust that shimmered in the flashlight's beam. Inside, I found old photographs and letters, yellowed with age and fragile to the touch. The images depicted the family who had lived here, a man with stern eyes, a woman with a wistful smile, and their 2 children, both with an unsettling blend of innocence and melancholy. The letters were written in a flowing, elegant script, but the words conveyed a growing sense of dread. They spoke of strange occurrences, disembodied voices in the night, objects moving of their own accord, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. The descriptions painted a picture of a household under siege by unseen forces, a family slowly driven to the brink by the relentless hauntings. One letter, dated the night before they vanished, stood out from the rest. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic, and the ink was smudged as if written with a trembling hand. It was a desperate plea for help, detailing an escalation of the supernatural phenomena. Whispers that grew louder and more insistent, shadows that moved with a life of their own, and the overwhelming sense that something malevolent was closing in on them. As I read the final lines, a chill ran down my spine. The letter ended abruptly, the last word scrawled in a jagged, frantic script. "We cannot escape. It is here." The basement seemed to grow colder, the silence thick and suffocating. The chest's contents had unveiled a glimpse into the family's torment, but it had also awakened something within the house. I felt the weight of their despair, their fear, and their final, desperate hope that someone would uncover their story, and perhaps, in doing so, free them from the grip of whatever dark force had claimed them. Armed with this new information, I ascended the staircase, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with each step. The old wood groaned under my weight, and the darkness seemed to press in closer, as if the shadows themselves were alive, writhing and pulsating with malevolent intent. The flickering beam of my flashlight did little to dispel the gloom, casting eerie shapes on the walls that twisted and shifted like specters. I reached the second floor, where the bedrooms were located. The hallway was long and narrow, lined with doors that seemed to lead into the unknown. The wallpaper, once opulent, was now faded and peeling, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and abandonment. A cold draft whispered through the corridor, carrying with it the faint, distant sound of children's laughter, echoing eerily through the silent house. I opened the first door to find a child's room. The sight that greeted me was both heartbreaking and unnerving. Toys were scattered across the floor, a dollhouse stood open, as if waiting for its little owner to return, and a teddy bear lay abandoned on the bed, its button eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. It was as if the child had left in a hurry, the room frozen in time, an untouched testament to a life abruptly interrupted. The air grew colder as I approached the master bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, a thin sliver of faint flickering light escaping into the dark hallway. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears as I reached out and pushed the door open. I gasped. The room before me was in pristine condition, a stark contrast to the rest of the decaying house. The wallpaper was rich and vibrant, the furniture polished and gleaming. A fire burned merrily in the fireplace, casting a warm golden glow that danced across the room. The bed was neatly made, its covers smooth and unruffled, as if awaiting its occupants. The air was warm and inviting, scented with the faint aroma of lavender, a scent that seemed completely out of place in this house of horrors. It was as if time had frozen in this room, preserving it in a perfect moment, while the rest of the house fell into ruin. The sight was both comforting and deeply unsettling. I felt a sense of unease, as if I had stepped into a different world, a world untouched by the passage of time, but haunted by the specters of the past. As I stood there, the fire flickering and casting shadows that seemed to dance with sinister glee, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The oppressive silence of the house seemed to press in on me, the whispers and laughter now replaced by a heavy, expectant quiet. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to uncover the final piece of its dark, twisted puzzle. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and the flickering light grew dim, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls like specters. The ancient wooden floorboards creaked ominously under my feet. I heard a soft sobbing sound, and turned to see a woman standing by the window, her back to me. She was dressed in an old-fashioned nightgown, its once white fabric now a ghostly gray, and her long matted hair cascaded down her back like a veil of despair. The scent of mildew and decay filled the air, and I felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow and dread emanating from her. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling, the words barely audible over the mounting silence. She turned slowly, revealing her face, pale and gaunt, with dark hollow eyes that seemed to see right through me. Her expression was a twisted mask of anguish, and her lips were tinged with a sickly blue. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally around the room, reverberating off the cold stone walls. Before I could respond, she vanished in a wisp of smoke, and the room plunged into darkness. The fire in the hearth sputtered out, and an oppressive cold closed in around me, as if the very essence of the house sought to suffocate me. The silence was shattered by the sudden sound of heavy footsteps rushing towards me, growing louder and more frantic. A child's eerie laughter echoed through the hallway, high-pitched and distorted, sending chills down my spine. The walls seemed to close in, and the darkness felt alive, pressing against me with malevolent intent. Panic set in as I bolted from the room, my flashlight flickering wildly. I raced down the stairs, the footsteps and laughter following me, growing louder and more frantic. I reached the front door, but it refused to budge. I pounded on it, desperate to escape, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see the pale man from the photograph, his eyes filled with sadness. "You must leave now," he said softly, "before it consumes you." With a final desperate effort, I pushed the door open and stumbled into the rain-soaked night. I ran to my car, not daring to look back. As I drove away, the house loomed in my rearview mirror, its windows glowing with an eerie light. I never returned to Stillwater, and I never spoke of what happened that night, but the memories haunted me, the images of the family and their tragic fate forever etched in my mind. I spent months researching the town's history, piecing together the events that led to their disappearance. It turned out that the family had been victims of a terrible crime, their spirits trapped in the house, unable to move on. My presence had stirred them, bringing their anguish to the surface. I realized that the house wasn't just haunted, it was a tomb, holding the souls of those who had suffered within its walls. Years later, I returned to the area, now overgrown and reclaimed by nature. The house still stood, its dark silhouette a stark contrast against the stormy sky. I approached cautiously, feeling the weight of its history bearing down on me. As I stood there, I felt a sense of peace.